LeFou, channel 347. You're hallucinating nationwide state of nations channel ing. We're going to call this one Pavlovian dog. It's a kind of nice evening, as you can see. Sun's come out. The normal band of runners, military personnel, kind of like flying by on the towpath, and there's a few walkers, but they're usually outnumbered by fitness freaks, and at this time of year, the fish are men, and there goes another one, and two, but he's walking, and you'll get a running commentary here. I'm gonna be accused. I know but you know, you've got to get into this. The thing is to stick with it and listen to the whole thing. That's when it comes together, not in the middle, because by law I ramble, and that's why people like BBC and all the broadcasters will never have me, because I veer off subject in the middle of telling a story. And it's like they don't want that. They want you to stick on subject, and they want their soundbite. And I don't do that. That's not my name. If it was a revolution in broadcasting, it would be me, because I'd change it completely. I'd let people talk, and it doesn't. People need to be able to tell stories, and that's what we're missing. We're missing stories. It's part of this, agenda to turn everybody into the same fucking thing, which the Pavlovian dog gets right, because that's what Bernard, this is a response to Bernard's article on the Pavlovian dog, which is exactly what's happened. It's Marxist. It is kind of Marxist. That's where it comes from, and that's the whole education system is based on that kind of philosophy. It's not capitalist. If we were capitalist, we'd be and progressive. We'd be progressing. We're not progressing. They'd have cars in the air by now, but they're not. They're keeping us in the freeze, which is, we're holding on to whatever there is for as long as possible, whilst we can make money out of it, because it makes a lot of people rich. And a lot of people stupid. That's not progression. Spiritual progression is the answer. But anyway, let's get on subject. Well, let's divert from the ramble onto subject. Because there's a lot going on in that article, and there's no way I can treat it all now. So I'm going to kind of try and do a couple of things. Because, there's no way that someone's going to write an article on psychedelia and get around me that easily. It's like, maybe they would have 20 years ago, but they're not now. I've been through it, in and out of it, and, I've never lost interest. So it's like, it hasn't done me personally any harm at all. In fact, I go with the bill. I forgot his name. Brett, no, never mind. I had a good trip, and I've always had a good trip. I haven't not had my moments, of course. You get moments. But the trick with, anything hallucinogenic is to kind of remind yourself that you've run it. A lot of people kind of forget it and just go haywire. And that's not the teacher's problem. That's the person's problem. They're kind of like they're not rewinding that story about popping a pill, which was going to take them off, planet, as it were. So so the Laurel Canyon in America was heralded in this article as being the birthplace of the hippie movement, or said to be, but it's never quite as simple as that. But I kind of get the connection, and there's a good connection for me, because where I grew up and where I hit it, as it were, was in a new town, which I've mentioned before, Crawley in Sussex, which is next to Gatwick Airport. Probably one of the reasons why why so much came in. They did a survey back in the late 60s and 70s of the heroin addiction in the worst places in the country, and Crawley came out second top of that. Second top of that of all places in the country. Now Crawley is like 60,000 people, so it's, you know, reasonable sized town. It's not huge, but it's enough to get lost in. And so they did a survey and they came out second top as heroin addiction. So what did they do? They brought in on the back of that, and I think it was probably set up, but you know, that's another story. I haven't checked it. I haven't researched that one, but I think it was probably set up. And they brought in the drug squad. Now, this drug squad were not uniformed. They were plain clothes. They were dressing like us, hippie. You know, the hippie. They were dressed up to kind of infiltrate. And that's where I learned about, you know, the paranoia that goes with, you know, not trusting people you're talking to. And so, you know, learning to distrust everything and question everything, because I never became scrumpy. I'm not asking for any, you know, money from Jack, premium British cider. But, you know, if I ever get kind of a couple of viewers more than I have, then I might put in another request for a form. But, you know, I'm not there yet, right? Anyway. So they came in as a kind of plain clothes and infiltrated the scene in Crawley, as it were. We used to turn up at the pub and strip search people. And it was on one occasion when I was rolling a joint at the table. You know, back in the days when you could smoke in a pub, and that's another stupid law that they removed from the good life, as it were. Because, you know, I remember the days when you used to go around Sussex in a car, stopping at the old pubs in Forest Row and such, and you could, you know, okay, you couldn't roll up a joint easily in some of those places, but you could definitely enjoy a smoke with a good beer, a local beer, or however you have. And some of that's probably still going, but the pubs have all sanitised themselves. And the whole tobacco thing is a part of the, you know, a part of the problem, because I've been smoking it since I was knee high. Well, not quite. And health-wise, I'm, you know, like, well, I'm 65, right? I'm not unhealthy. I'm not 100%, but I'm not unhealthy. And it's like my lungs have never had a problem. So, and I've got a silhouette on me now, which is okay. For the moment, you can bear not seeing my face, right? So, anyway, infiltration. So what I'm saying is, I was introduced to the whole idea of infiltrated communities from early on. So I was always on the lookout because I knew what it was, and that's why I keep on saying, and I'll never stop saying it, that, you know, if you think that the 60s was infiltrated in that way, then if you think there's been no movement in that direction into communities, and especially the protest movement, then, you know, get a life, because it's all been infiltrated. In fact, it's completely organised, and no one wants to discuss it because they're too frightened, and no one wants to discuss it because they're too stupid, and no one wants to discuss it because they've stopped being critical, which is exactly what the article was saying. We've been brainwashed by education, and although that's true mostly, it's not always true. And this is why I can tell a story, because I know that I went through. See, I didn't go into further education until 10 years after I started traveling, after I left my hometown, and because I hadn't got a clue about much before that time. And it was like I remember saying to myself, when the day I left school, well, this is the first day of my education, because up until then I'd been, well, I'm not going to tell you the whole story of that one, but I ended up in a secondary comprehensive school in Crawley, and uh, I knew it wasn't for me, probably from the day I arrived until the day I left, which then took me travelling, which was where my education began. And you only really get to see and understand where you're from when you leave it. That's the same with anything, you know. It's the same with the place you're in right now. Always, well, you don't know. No one knows what's going to happen next, and that's living in the moment. And that's what you should be doing: is living right in the moment. And because when you're traveling, you're on the edge, right? Because you never know what's going to happen next. And actually, I found that another runner. I'm going to report on runners because they go. There's a towpath just here, and there's always people walking by, but it's kind of quiet here because there's a dead end up there. So, except for some stairs that run up, so you have to go around if you want to join the path again for a long way. So it's another reason why it's quiet here. It is quite quiet, except for the military, military school, which is another story. Let's not go over that. Anyway, so infiltration, yeah. So I was quite familiar with it anyway at the time, but well, you understand. There's always nothing is ever, you can't put groups down like that and call everyone in it. Those as a projection. It's a ridiculous idea that you can never do that. We had a problem in Crawley, because I was known as the head, and there was one pub in Crawley called the Rocket, which is where all the heads used to meet. And I used to roll joints in there, in the days that you could smoke in a pub. I think I haven't been there already. Let's not go there again. And so I'm just setting up. What I'm doing there is just setting up the idea that infiltration is not new, and the more you check it out properly, the more you kind of see into it, because I've said it so many times, it hurts to say it with no one commenting, because they're frightened as fuck of talking about how it is and why they should be involved in something that's infiltrated. Well, it's not just infiltrated; it's run by. The whole protest movement is mostly. Yeah, apart from the previous thing on my timeline, which I don't think was actually, I think that's kind of the roots, that one. But it's going to be labelled conspiracy rumors because of the nature of the programming, which I mentioned the other day, comes from broadcasting media, because they kind of label this thing conspiracy theory when it's nothing to do with conspiracy theory. It's to do with facts. Quite obvious ones as well, but people can't see them because they think we live in some kind of well, this is the only reality there is. When it's quite clearly not. Laurel Canyon, you see, and here's another example of how it's not simple, because I remember I read quite a lot of stuff about some of the bands that came out of Laurel Canyon. And so I was, let's just take one up, Frank Zappa. I kind of liked his. I met his music quite in that period in Crawley before I left, and I was living in a street with a few other people, and we were all the same. Really, kind of doing a lot of the weed, and we were all LSDers as well. At the time, it was it was before the days of ecstasy and MDMA and all the other stuff that came eventually comes in on the back. We were all mostly into LSD because it was strong, and it was strong. It was dead strong. But most of the days when I was kind of innocent of it as well, I hadn't really sussed it out much. But you know, if you take people like, this is where it kind of goes crazy. People like Timothy Leary, who is, you know, they always kind of quote him as a CIA agent. Well, you know, I know he's heralded from the CIA, but you know, some people are one step ahead of the game, and Timothy Leary is one of them. And of course, you know, well, you know, he was put in prison many times, sometimes for only having a roach in his hand. Well, you know, if he's from the CIA and the authorities are after him, he's either going to be, you know, it can't be caught that easily for doing what he's supposed to do, and end up in prison being chased all over the planet. Okay, he's got an interesting story because he was chased. And he's got another interesting story because if you read his writing, there was more going on. And, you know, liking women? Come on. It's a stupid argument. Of course, you know, people like women, right? So, you know, there was a spiritual thing going on with Timothy Leary and quite a cosmic mind. So, you know, it is interesting because obviously in Laurel Canyon there was more going on, and they had a, you know, I read the article. They had a big studio there that was said to be set up by, you know, military. And yeah, I'm reading the article. It turns out that, you know, most of the musicians, including Zappa, were from a military background. Well, if you know, just to kind of like put a front line on that, I also found Runnymede Eco Village that a good 80% of the people who got involved in that, especially at the beginning, it got a bit more complex towards the end, but especially at the beginning, were from military backgrounds, and that's where climate comes in, because most of the people are from military backgrounds. And if you want if you want a line on it, the protest movement is the last line of defense of the government. You know, because if you think about it, kind of some people are going to come through that whole movement, and if they're not known, or they're not from military background, they're kind of eye-open, especially if they're half intelligent. That's a third runner in 5 minutes. You know, great. So, if you're not asking, and you know, like military backgrounds, well, you know, it doesn't take much to work out. But if you're from a military background, you're probably, because you travel around a lot, especially from the intelligence agencies, or your parents are from intelligence agencies, so you're not a simple character, because you're gonna find out. And another one. Oh my god. When they pass microphones on to each other, you know, because they're all listening in. Anyway, so Zappa, you know, his father was chemical weapons expert working in the American military at the time, and this was, you know, pre or around the same time that Vietnam kicked in. The whole thing with Vietnam kicked in, and the protests started kind of erupting against war, which, you know, well, you know, there's not been that many in the last 10, 20 years against the war machine, has there? It's not. We're not fighting against the war program now, whereas they were then. And although I am absolutely convinced that the CIA and the secret agencies and the military are always involved in gatherings like this, There's another story to this, in that, you know, they want to set up a picture about well, they had to crush the hippie movement. So, you know, first of all, they have to set it up, and then they have to crush it. Well, if it's, you know, people are dying left, right, and centre, and then you got the story of the Mansons, you know. And by the way, Manson, like, probably the only person to be put away for not committing a crime. You know, like, it was said that he organised it and kind of got his students. Well, it, you know, just goes to show, doesn't it, that you know, if you can follow someone like that, then you're heavily programmed to go and commit crime like that. Just because someone said it. I mean, Christ, this goes to show how programmed. Because the people who ended up doing the killing had mostly just come out of school, heavily influenced. You know, this is Marxism to the raw. So, you know, like, he didn't commit the crime. And if you think about that one, then why haven't they put, you know, every fucking general in prison for being involved in any war whatsoever for the last 100 years? You know, it doesn't make sense. They all get away with it except for Manson, who, you know, and, you know, the horror of it, and then and, you know, like, they read that article. It's kind of, it's a bit of a horror story. You know, people popping off left, right, and centre. The picture coming out is the hippie movement's fucked. You know, it's actually fucking gone insane. Well, you know, there's more going on. You've got to read into it more. And Zappa actually said, you know, that I don't know why people can't. I don't know why people can't listen to that man, because he was connected, right? And he said that the politics is. He was the one who said politics is a fear of the military-industrial complex. Well, you know, people won't. They don't, do they? They won't even touch it, because it's like, you know, it's on the edge of, you know, there's a conspiracy going on. You know. When I said the other day, what is conspiracy? It's conspiring to do anything. That's, you know, and the theory was set up by the newsreader. You know, in the repeated line, "Oh, it's just conspiracy theory." Well, you know, do the fucking homework. When I first got onto this, right? Because I went through the broadcasting, and then in the early '90s, when the internet hit, I started researching pretty much straight away, because that's what you do in television. You research. If you're making a documentary, you've got to research it. So I had several ideas, and one of them was to hit the bloodline. So I started researching it, and that's when one of the things changed for me, because I kind of realised who the Rothschilds were straight there, and I looked at the family ancestry, the bloodline, and well, I tried to get my kids to look at it, but they thought I was fucking mad, and I think, as far as I know, they still do, but it's not mad. It's not at all. You've got to look at these things. Money and banking is the Rothschilds, and the lending. You know, they set up the national. It's called a lending to nations, so, you know, they're going to make money. Because nations were set up to borrow money to manufacture the war machine, which is a military school, and so what I'm saying really is that I'm saying that nothing is that easy, and that another one. Nothing. The sun's going down now. It's quite nice here, actually. Nothing is that easy, and you can't put a projection of a type, as in a whole group, and get away with it that easily in my line. It just doesn't work, because people have their own lives, and you really have to understand that particular life before you can start. projecting group stuff onto them. It's just, like people have to wake up to the uniqueness of themselves, really. So, and this is, one of the reasons the psychedelic, right, has not really evolved as it should, because they don't survey those people who've taken it and had no problem and actually gained from it, except to say, the world's gone mad thinking that the LSD and other psychedelic drugs can help with problems. Well, yeah, what problems are they giving you apart from depression? We're suffering from a trauma which goes way back, and it comes down through the generations. And they planted this depression on a whole nation. England's probably the most depressed country ever, with people like sinking into it, and then accepting all the pills that you're given, which is like fatal, because you get caught by it, and then you've got an excuse for. There's 3 more. It's Saturday night, and 2 fishermen, and it's when most people, they just go and run because they really have to get into being able to tell their own story. And on education, like it wasn't always true either. But the people educate. It's true in secondary, because all that is it's limited. It's limited to what the system wants to teach you. There's a whole lot of subjects, including symbolism, which is missed completely for a reason, because it's stepping into the occult. The occult is forbidden. Like, so most people, it's mentioning the word cult and they go crazy. With, ooh. And it's like, open the book. You're not going to get anywhere until you understand it, because that's how the world runs. Open the book. Open the book. Well, up until, I would say, about 1980, well, Orwell, who is it? Orwell, 1984. I'd taken 10 years out travelling, and then I came back and I did a fine art degree in Newcastle upon Tyne. And I'm telling you, the degree I did, which I started in 1983, was one of the few in the country that had no agenda, no nothing. You were completely free to do what you want, which is one of the reasons I chose it, because it was like I could just get on expanding my own knowledge of myself and using the technology that they had there, and they had tutors as well, good tutors who knew the stuff. So they had media there, and that's why I took up film. And but I was free to do what I wanted, absolutely free. There was no curriculum as such. There was history of art, and you didn't have to go unless you were doing history of art, and it's kind of essential. But as a fine art, you didn't have to go to any of that, but I did, and I went to the film history as well, which was excellent. There was a really interesting tutor there but it was free, it was open course, and this was about 1983, and I am telling you, 4 years later after I left, everything had changed in education. The kind of education had been getting rammed by first Thatcher, and then it went on with Blair, and they brought in Ofsted to go and check on every bloody school in the country that they were doing the right thing. Well, it's a shame politicians don't get that kind of treatment. They don't get it at all. They don't get checked. They have this kind of pseudo, court system where people like Blair are asked to go in and answer questions, which never resolve. Fuck all. He's a criminal. Why isn't he arrested and in prison? I haven't got a clue, but there you go. This kind of shows you why politics is the most corrupt system ever. And why people can't see it, I don't know. And it all changed. 1984, you know, all the modules. I was teaching then. I finished the degree and I started doing a bit of part-time teaching to make some money. I was teaching media in higher education, but like these kids had just left school and they were kind of like being attracted into furthering their education with the £40 a week supplement for doing it, which they wouldn't have got if they hadn't, because they couldn't sign on then. So there was free money, right? For starting a course. So none of them wanted to do it. When I was teaching them the rudiments of filmmaking, and after about a year, that's when it all started changing. With me doing that, I noticed how there were all sorts of administrative rules coming in, changing everything. So that the teachers that were there, some of them were really good. And you could say were leftish, you know, as I was at the time. I was, you know, politically motivated up until I read the story of the bloodline, the Rothschilds, and then I changed everything for me. I kind of dropped all left and right. I'm not. You won't find me affiliated to any party. I'm off the edge, man. It's like you won't be able to put that one on me. I'm not right or left. I'm anti-politics. I'm anti-democracy. It's a charade, complete. And so they started changing education, and so that's why my battery's going low. I was going to pick this one up again because obviously only just started and I'm kind of rambling, but there's definitely a couple of other pickups on that whole thing. One of which was Trump, because I wanted to say more about Trump as well, and how see, this is where I differ with Bernard, because I don't think it's all set up. They're pulling. It's meant to happen that he questions the. Which reminds me that, you know, I put a video up of David Icahn, and you know, from being in the protest of the conspiracy rumors in London last week, and it got taken down because it was David Icahn talking about, you know, what he talked about. Well, this is, you know, this is where it's all gone. It's kind of like I don't give a fuck what someone's saying. Let them say it. You know, in fact, the more controversial what they're saying is the better, because then we can get into the debate. Well, and so they're stopping all that. And so they sent me a note, Facebook, telling me, you know, what I'd done, and that to go to the WHO, which is, you know, back to Trump, right? Because he's attacking WHO and all that. Well, you know, people think this is where I think, you know, a lot of people are getting it wrong, because they're treating it as if, you know, he saved the world from the Clintons. Well, I'm not saying because I don't know enough about Trump himself as whether he's actually connected with the Peatsgate and all that. But you know, people keep a toilet, and there's absolutely no way in hell that he doesn't know more than he's saying. This is the same as any politician. Well, you know, he was set up by, you know, he's known to be a kind of business failure. He was saved by the richest families you can think of. For what? Because what they're doing, he's a trickster. He's kind of clever. He's clever, but people have kind of gone overboard trying to defend him because he's doing things that no other politician did. But this is the times. This is what they're doing. This is what politics has become. It's because they want to fuck everything up, and break it all down. And so that is, you know, as far as I'm concerned, it's planned. It's planned. No president gets in without there being a motive for it. And the motive, if you want to go, you know, a bit deeper, because it goes even deeper, is money. And it's like, you know, it's the money story. You follow the money. So, you know, people got money, you pay to get their problem sorted out by, you know, employing groomed politicians to, and this is where interesting on Kennedy, because I think that, you know, actually there's probably a story of grooming there too, and sacrifice too. That's another story. Let's not go there. So I was saying that I'm going to wind this one up because we're down to 7%, and well, you know, see you later.